Spent 9 years learning how to breathe again, not metaphorically, literally. The first time I tried to take a deep breath on my own after they reduced the ventilator settings, my chest seized up like rusted machinery, and I thought, if this is what coming back feels like, maybe I should have stayed wherever I was. But I didn't stay. And that is the part of this story I still don't fully understand. I was 61 years old when the accident happened. A February morning on Route 9 outside Bozeman, Montana. Black ice. A logging truck that drifted 2 feet into my lane, and then nothing. No white light, no tunnel, no voice telling me it wasn't my time, just nothing. 9 years of nothing. And then the beeping of a monitor. A fluorescent light too bright for eyes that hadn't seen anything in nearly a decade, and a nurse named Carol who held my hand and said, very quietly, Mr. Hargrove, you came back. My name is Leonard Hargrove. I am 70 years old now, and I want to tell you what I came back to. Before the accident, I had one son. His name is Owen. He was 32 when I went under, sharp-minded, a little stubborn the way I used to be. The kind of young man who argues with you at dinner but shows up without being asked when something breaks. His mother, my wife June, had passed 4 years before the accident from pancreatic cancer, and after that it was just the two of us, Owen and me. He helped me through the grief the way sons do when they're trying to be men about something, quietly, imperfectly, and with total sincerity. I had a business, Hargrove Agricultural Consulting. 31 years of building it from one pickup truck and a cell phone to a firm with 12 full-time staff, contracts across 4 states, and a headquarters I owned outright on the edge of town. I had built that business the way my father taught me to build anything, slowly, honestly, and with both hands. When the accident happened, the business was valued at just over $11 million. I had a will, a succession plan, and a power of attorney document I had signed 2 years prior, in the event of incapacitation, granting my younger brother Stuart authority to manage my affairs. I trusted Stuart. He was family. He was blood. I had lent him money twice without asking for a timeline on repayment. I had co-signed a lease for his commercial property in Billings. I had stood beside him at his second wedding and meant every word I said about wishing him happiness. What I came back to, 9 years later, was this, my son Owen, heir to everything I had spent a lifetime building, working as an operations coordinator at what used to be my own company, not as a manager, not in any leadership capacity, as a mid-level employee, answering to people he had never met in a building his father had purchased with cash in 2004. He did not know I had woken up. No one called him. I found out later that the rehabilitation facility had contacted the number on my emergency forms, Stuart's number, and Stuart had told them he would handle the family notifications. He handled them the way he handled everything that inconvenienced him, by doing nothing and hoping the problem resolved itself. The facility eventually reached Owen through the county records office 6 weeks after I regained consciousness. 6 weeks. By then I was already walking short distances with a cane and had started eating solid food again. Carol, the nurse who'd held my hand that first morning, had become something of an unofficial advocate for me during those weeks. She was the one who told me, gently but without flinching, that I should prepare myself, that things may not look the way I remembered. She was being kind. The reality was worse than anything I had imagined in those first disoriented weeks. I did not call Owen right away. I know that sounds strange, but I had been asleep for 9 years, and I needed to understand what I was waking up into before I said a word to anyone. I asked Carol to keep my improvement quiet. She was not obligated to do this, and I was grateful she agreed, and I spent 2 weeks requesting documents. My medical records first, then through a patient advocate at the facility, I submitted a formal request for copies of my legal filings. What came back told me most of what I needed to know. Stuart had exercised the power of attorney within 18 months of my accident. He had restructured Hargrove Agricultural Consulting as a limited liability company, naming himself as sole managing member. Owen had been offered a position coordinator level, with a salary that was professional but unremarkable. There was paperwork suggesting Owen had been told the restructuring was necessary to protect the assets during my incapacitation. There was a letter, signed by an attorney I had never hired, indicating that I had, prior to the accident, expressed intentions to revise my estate plan. I had expressed no such intention. I had not revised anything. My original will left everything to Owen. The business, the property, a brokerage account worth roughly $2.4 million, the house, all of it. Owen's. But wills can be contested when someone has been in a coma for 9 years and has a family member with power of attorney and apparently very few scruples about how he used it. I did not cry when I understood what had happened. I am not a man who cries easily. What I felt was something colder, a specific clarifying anger that I recognized from the years I spent building the business, the kind that doesn't make you reckless, but makes you very, very focused. I had felt it once before, when a larger firm tried to absorb one of my key contracts through back-channel pressure. I had felt it, and I had won that fight. And I had learned then that the best revenge in business is documentation. I started documenting. Owen came to see me in early March. He walked into my room at the facility and stopped in the doorway, and I watched his face go through something I will never forget. Disbelief first, then something that looked like physical pain. And then he was across the room with his arms around me, and neither of us said anything for a long time. He was 41 years old. He had grey at his temples. He smelled like the same aftershave his grandfather used to wear, and I do not know why that detail undid me more than anything else, but it did. When we could both speak again, I told him I needed a few more days before he told anyone I was awake. He didn't fully understand why, but he agreed. Owen had always trusted me the way I had trusted my own father, not blindly but fundamentally. It was the best quality he had. He told me about the 9 years while I listened. He told me carefully, choosing his words, not wanting to upset me. He told me about the restructuring as though it had been something he'd had some say in. He told me about his position at the company, how he tried to learn the operational side because it felt like a way to stay close to what I'd built. He told me he had a daughter now, my granddaughter, Iris, 7 years old, who had my mother's dark eyes and apparently a personality loud enough to fill a house. He did not tell me that first visit that he had been passed over for a raise twice. He did not tell me that Stuart had, the previous year, begun the process of selling the Billings headquarters, the building I had paid for, to a commercial real estate group. He did not tell me that his title at the company was, technically, beneath 3 people Stuart had hired from outside who had no history with Hargrove Agricultural and no particular expertise in what we actually did. He didn't tell me because he was trying to protect me. He had been protecting me for 9 years the only way he knew how, by holding everything together with both hands and not letting go. I found all of that out through other means. I had an attorney. Her name is Beverly. We had worked together on a contract dispute 15 years ago, and she was one of the sharpest people I had ever sat across a table from. I had her personal number in a document I kept in the facility's patient safe. I called her on a Tuesday morning while Owen was at work and Carol was on her break. Beverly picked up on the second ring. I said, "It's Leonard Hargrove. I know it's been a while." There was a pause. Then she said, "Leonard Hargrove. I heard you were, are you calling me from a hospital?" "Rehabilitation facility," I said. "I'm going to need your help." She drove up from Billings the following Thursday. We talked for 4 hours. I laid out everything I knew, everything I had documented, and she filled in the gaps from what was publicly available. The picture that emerged was not ambiguous. Stuart had not stolen from me in any dramatic, cinematic way. He had done something more insidious. He had used every legal mechanism available to him to gradually, methodically transfer control of everything I owned into his own hands, using my incapacitation as cover and my son's deference as a tool. Owen hadn't fought back because he had believed, had been made to believe, that this was what I would have wanted, that it was temporary, that when I improved, if I improved, everything would be returned to its rightful state. Stuart had said this apparently many times, at family gatherings and in emails and in conversations that Owen had not thought to save, because why would you save emails from your uncle promising to do the right thing? You save them, you always save them. Dash is the lesson I wish I could have taught my son before he needed it. Beverly filed for an emergency review of the power of attorney. citing my restored capacity, and simultaneously initiated proceedings to contest the LLC restructuring on grounds of self-dealing and breach of fiduciary duty. She also flagged the property sale to the commercial real estate group, which had not yet closed. There was a 30-day window, and she moved to halt it pending investigation. We did not tell Stuart. The first moment he learned I was awake was the morning Beverly's process server appeared at his door in Billings, with a stack of legal documents thick enough to use as a doorstop. I was told later that he sat down on his front steps and didn't say a word for almost a full minute. I had planned to feel triumphant. What I actually felt in that moment was tired and sad. Not for myself, for the wasted years, yes, but mostly for what Stuart had done to himself. He had been given a trust and he had eaten it. Whatever was left of him after this, and there would be very little, was entirely his own making. Owen did not find out about any of the legal proceedings until 2 weeks after Beverly filed. I sat him down in the rehabilitation facility's small family meeting room with Iris drawing horses on a notepad in the corner, and Owen's wife Catherine sitting beside him with her hand on his arm, and I told him everything. He listened the way he always listened to difficult things. Very still, very quiet, processing before he reacted. When I finished, he didn't say anything about Stuart at first. What he said was, "Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner?" And I said, "Because I needed to fix it before I could explain it." "That's the same reason you didn't tell me half of what was happening when you came to see me." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I really am your son, aren't I?" Iris looked up from her horses at that and said, "Obviously," which broke the tension in the way that only 7-year-olds can. "The legal process took 14 months. I will spare you most of it, because most of it was documentation and depositions and the specific tedium of watching a man's web of financial decisions unravel thread by thread under legal scrutiny. What mattered was the outcome. The LLC restructuring was voided. The property sale was permanently blocked. Stuart was removed from any position of authority over my assets and was subsequently sued civilly for breach of fiduciary duty, a suit that, after mediation, resulted in a settlement that I will not discuss in detail, but which was, Beverly told me, as good as it gets outside of a courtroom. Stuart did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that. What he did was legally complex, and he had been careful enough that criminal fraud charges required a standard of proof we could not meet without years of additional litigation. That was frustrating. It remains frustrating. But he lost everything that mattered to him: the authority, the income, the respect of the extended family, and the illusion he had apparently constructed around himself that he was the competent one, the capable one, the one who had actually built something. He had not built anything. He had borrowed from someone who trusted him, and he had spent 9 years calling it his own. I moved back to Montana in early summer. The house was exactly as I had left it, which was its own strange mercy. Stuart had rented it, but the tenants had been careful and the bones of the place were unchanged. I walked through every room the first evening and let myself feel the weight of it. June's reading chair was still in the corner of the bedroom. I had asked Owen to keep it there, and he had. I sat in it for a while and talked to her, which is something I do sometimes when I need to think clearly. She was always better at clarity than I was. Owen took over as president of Hargrove Agricultural Consulting 6 weeks after the proceedings concluded. He brought in 2 of the staff members who had stayed loyal through the restructuring years, people who had known the company before and who had quietly kept the institutional memory alive, and he let go of the 3 directors Stuart had installed. He did it without drama, which is exactly how I would have done it. He was, and remains, a better manager than I was at his age. He is steadier. He gets that from his mother. Iris has taken to coming to the office on some Saturdays. She sits at the small desk in the corner of Owen's office and does her homework with tremendous seriousness, and occasionally wanders in to ask me questions that have nothing to do with homework. Last week, she asked me what I thought about when I was asleep for all those years. I told her I didn't think about anything, that it was like a very long night with no dreams. She considered this and said, "That sounds boring." It does. It was. But here is the thing about a very long night with no dreams. You don't know how much you missed until the morning comes and you realize what's still there, waiting. My son is still here. My granddaughter is here. The business I built is still standing, now in hands I would have chosen from the beginning. The house still has June's chair in the corner, and the porch still faces east, and on a clear morning you can see the mountains from the bottom step. 9 years of nothing, and I came back to this. I came back to Owen's arms in a hospital doorway, to Iris's impossible questions, to Beverly's voice on the phone saying, "We've got him, Leonard," to the smell of pine and cold air coming through a window I opened for the first time in nearly a decade. I am 70 years old. I lost 9 years. I will never recover. My brother is a stranger to me now by his own choice as much as mine. But I did not lose what mattered. I did not lose the thing I actually built. And some mornings, sitting on that east-facing porch with a cup of coffee while the mountains go from grey to gold, I think that the accident did one thing for me that nothing else could have. It showed me exactly what I had, by showing me what someone else wanted badly enough to take. It was worth more than $11 million. It always was. I just didn't have the language for it until I lost 9 years and found it waiting on the other side. I have thought a lot, in the months since everything concluded, about what it actually means to betray someone's trust. Not the dramatic version, not the kind you see coming, where someone looks you in the eye and lies. The kind Stuart did was quieter than that. It was a slow, patient erasure, a series of small decisions, each one defensible on its own, that added up to something monstrous. He didn't steal from me in a moment of weakness. He planned. He waited. He used the legal tools I had put in place to protect my family and turned them into instruments for taking everything my family was supposed to have. That is the thing about trust. It doesn't just make you vulnerable in the ways you can see. It makes you vulnerable in the ways you never thought to guard against. I gave Stuart power of attorney because I trusted him. I didn't build in safeguards because I believed the relationship itself was the safeguard. I was wrong. And that wrongness cost my son 9 years of working in his own inheritance like a stranger. Owen never complained. That is what gets me even now. He showed up every day to that company, did his job, kept the institutional knowledge alive, and waited, not because he was weak, but because he genuinely believed the situation was temporary. He had his father's instinct to hold things together without making a scene. And Stuart used that against him too, counting on Owen's decency the same way he had counted on mine. What I learned, not as a lesson, but as something I now carry in my chest, is that decency has to be paired with documentation. Character matters, integrity matters, but integrity without evidence is just a story you tell yourself while someone else rewrites the record. The moment I understood what had happened to my affairs, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't confront anyone. I called Beverly and I started building a paper trail. That restraint, that cold focus, that was not calculated revenge. It was the only responsible thing I could do for Owen. Emotion would have made me loud. Loudness would have warned Stuart. Quiet, methodical effort gave us everything. There is something I want to say directly, because I think it matters. The outcome of this story was not inevitable. Stuart could have gotten away with it. He came very close. If I had not woken up, if Owen had not kept the company stable enough to be worth fighting for, if Beverly had not been reachable on a Tuesday morning, any one of those things, and this story ends differently. Justice is not guaranteed. What you can control is how prepared you are when the opportunity to fight for it arrives. I am 70 years old. I know now that the most important things I built in my life were not the company, not the property, not the brokerage account. They were Owen's character and the relationship between us, the kind of trust that meant he walked into a rehabilitation facility and knew, without explanation, to give me the time I needed. Nobody can restructure that. Nobody can transfer it to their own name. It was the one thing Stuart could not touch, and in the end, it was the only thing that mattered. Iris asked me last week what I would do differently if I could go back. I thought about it seriously, the way she deserved. I told her I would save more emails. She laughed, which was the right response, but I meant it.